Hello, in this video we will be telling some of the most important anecdotes in your lives, but we will also show the difference in expressing ourselves through oral communication and writing communication. Let's go start.
A few weeks ago, I had an interesting conversation with my grandmother about how communication has changed over the years. She told me that when she was younger, people relied mostly on letters and landline phones to stay in touch. She had to wait weeks to receive a letter from a friend or a relative living far away. She also mentioned how exciting it was to receive a letter as it felt more personal and meaningful. In contrast, nowadays we have instant messaging apps, video calls, and emails, which allows us to communicate immediately. While she appreciates modern technology, she also believes that digital communication has made interaction less personal. She said that handwriting letters carried emotions that text messages often lack. This conversation made me realize how much communication has evolved and how technology has changed the way we interact. While we know have faster and more efficient ways to communicate, the emotion and emotional depth of handwriting method seems to be disappearing nowadays. If I were to write this history, I will focus on organizing the ideas clearly. Using paragraph and formal structure, the tone will be more reflective and descriptive, with more details about the historical context of communication. I will also include direct quotes from my grandmother to make the history, I don't know, more engaging. However, if I were telling this story orally, the delivery will be more dynamic, with changes in the tone and emphasis to capture attentions. Uh, I could add pauses to create suspense and use facial expressions to cover emotion instead of long. A structured sentence, I will use a more natural conversational tone to make it sound more spontaneous. Both formats are effective, but they serve different purposes. Writing communication allows for deeper analysis, while oral communication creates a more engaging and personal connection with the audience.
Recently, I watched a news video on YouTube about an impressive medical breakthrough. Scientists successfully transplanted a genetically modified pig kidney into a human patient with kidney failure. This procedure could help reduce the waiting list for organ transplants and revolutionize medicine. Researchers use pit kidneys because their size and structure are similar to those of humans. However, one of the main challenges was immune rejection, as the human body typically identifies tissues from other species as foreign and unadapted. To prevent this, the organs were genetically modified by removing certain genes that trigger rejection and adding others that made them more compatible with humans. The procedure was performed on a brain dead patient to evaluate the organ's functions. Surprisingly, the kidneys immediately began producing urine, indicating that it was working correctly. After several days of observation, researchers confirmed that the organ remained stable and showed no signs of immediate rejection. This breakthrough opens the door to the use of other genetically modified animals' organs, such as ears, liver, or lungs, which could save millions of lives. However, some challenges still need to be addressed, such as ensuring that the human body does not reject the organ in the long term, preventing possible diseases transmitted from animals to humans, and improving transplant techniques to guarantee that these organs are fully functional in humans. Despite this challenge, this breakthrough represents a key step in solving the global organ transplant crisis. With further studies and clinical trials, we may see with organ transplants become a viable solution for saving lives in the future. This story has its difference when presented in written form versus orally. For example, the tone changes. In writing, I would make more formal and precise, perhaps through an essay or a written report, whereas orally it would have a more natural and conversational tone, whether in a conversation, a video, or an oral presentation. In writing, the structure will be more organized using titles, paragraphs, and connectors, while in speech it will be more flexible with pauses and emphasis. The objective in writing will be to inform using detailed information, while orally the objective will be to capture attention and generate interest. In written, the language tends to be more technical and elaborate, whereas in speech, it is simpler and more expressive. Finally, a written news piece can include graphics or citation from the news source or scientists, while in an oral presentation, the story relies on voice and gestures to engage the audience.
On my birthday a few years ago, I was working as usually with no special plan. Suddenly, one my closest friend showed up my office with a cook and my whole group friend. She has invited at the last minute. I was not experiencing it at all and was very shocked. I was a little reminder of how low I am too. Telling an anecdote oral and writing has some case different in style, structure, form, and presentation. Here are the main one. Number one is communication style. In the oral communication is more spontaneous and fluid. In the conversation, pauses, gestures, tone of voice, and facial expression play an important role to give emphasis and make the story more entertaining. In the writing communication, um, tends to be more structured and tone out. You cannot modify in the moment someone is reading it. Number two is structure. In the oral communication is a oral narrative. The structure is more flexible. Someone you can jump from one dial to another or go back and for in the story. And people can follow the story because it feels a more appropriate formal. In the writing communication is usually more organized and coherent. You have the opportunity to plan the dials, make sure the sequence of events is logical and better control the flow of the story. Finally, use the dials and expression. In the narrative, you can use gestures, changes in tone of voice, and facial expression to give more context or emphasis to the history. And the writing communication, you must use work to create images, emotion, and as